Welcome to this week's virtual visit. My name is Kevin Rose, historian with the Turner Foundation and founder of Westcott Summer Tour Series. This week, we're visiting the Chapel of the Heavenly Rest at Christ Episcopal Church and looking at a beautiful window by Robert Metcalfe. Enjoy.
The Chapel of the Heavenly Rest at Christ Episcopal Church is one of Springfield, Ohio's unexpected treasures. The chapel sits below the sanctuary in a corner of the church's ground-level basement. In 1959, in response to the nationwide growth of Sunday school education following the Second World War, the church made plans to remodel their underused basement into classrooms. The new education center included plans for this small chapel, named after the former Heavenly Rest Church on South Plum Street, which had merged with Christ Episcopal 20 years earlier. The chapel's walnut entry makes an immediate impression. The modern font above the door sends a clear message that the space beyond is unlike anything contained in the original 1874 sanctuary. On the interior, the doors carry alternating carved wood images of sheaf and grapes symbolizing the Eucharist. The room's black slate floor is embellished with brass tiles that depict a variety of Christian symbols. The ceiling is checkerboarded with dark blue and red squares, each with a cross fleury stenciled in gold. This dark ceiling, along with the black floor, helps set off the room's most distinctive feature, a stained glass window by Robert Metcalfe. Robert was born to George and Odessa Metcalfe in Springfield on December 22, 1902, 3 days before Christmas. It is likely that Robert was baptized here at Christ Episcopal Church, in the same sanctuary that his parents exchanged wedding vows 2 years earlier. The family lived just north of Wittenberg College, where Robert enrolled at his father's behest in 1921. At the end of his freshman year, he convinced his parents to let him study art at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art in downtown Philadelphia. There, Robert received a scholarship that provided him the opportunity to travel around Western Europe for a year in 1924, including stays in Italy, France, Germany, and England. The stained glass windows of Western Europe's many medieval Gothic cathedrals made a lasting impression on the young artist. Upon his return to the United States, he gained employment at the Case Stained Glass Studio in Reading, Pennsylvania. There he met and married fellow apprentice Gertrude Rahm. Robert's subsequent tenure in the Henry Wind Young Studio in New York City brought him recognition as an artist, which he carried into the creation of his own studio in 1931. Robert received several high-profile commissions, including a memorial window for the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, yet the effects of the Great Depression caused his studio to struggle. In 1934, he accepted a teaching position at the School of the Dayton Art Institute and moved his family to Ohio. In 1937, fearing the possibility of war in Europe, Gertrude and Robert devised a plan to survey and photograph medieval stained glass windows that would be threatened by another conflagration. With the financial backing of Dayton philanthropist Julia Carnell, they traveled around Europe between 1937 and 1939, photographing and mapping windows in Notre Dame Cathedral in France, Augsburg Cathedral in Germany, and Canterbury Cathedral in England, to name just a few. These Kodachrome prints, now preserved as part of Princeton's Index of Christian Art, are some of the earliest color photographs ever taken of these iconic cathedrals. Although the couple captured thousands of images across 3 years, their trip was cut short when Germany invaded Poland in September 1939. The family set sail on one of the last pre-war steamers bound for America. Robert Metcalfe's window in the Chapel of the Heavenly Rest is greatly influenced by the windows he documented across Europe. His approach could best be described as a modern interpretation of medieval styles from the 11th to the 15th centuries. The central figure of Jesus has much in common with the earliest known stained glass depictions of Christ, including this one from the Abbey Church of Saints Peter and Paul in Weissenberg, Germany, which dates to the 11th century. This similarity is best understood when compared against the stained glass representations of Jesus that Robert knew as a young man, like this image of Christ in the sanctuary above. Robert Metcalfe's stylized Jesus could also be contrasted with the realism employed by other leading stained glass makers of the 20th century, best illustrated in this beautiful French settler window in the nave of St. Raphael Roman Catholic Church, which was installed in 1919 when Robert was a student at Springfield High School. The fragmented style of the Heavenly Rest window, which also has its antecedents in medieval stained glass, is complex yet symphonic. The window's deep reds, bright yellows, cobalt blues, and various shades of green, teal, and orange form one harmonious whole. Symbols are hidden throughout, including the storiogram, fleur-de-lis, serpents, and crosses. If one looks closely, they will also see this stylized RM, the signature of the artist. Christ Episcopal Church is the product of Springfield's wealth and prosperity in the second half of the 19th century. The city led the world in the production of farm machinery, and even christened itself the Champion City after its famed Champion harvesting machine. The owners of that company were members of this church, along with many of the city's other leading industrialists. Robert Metcalfe paid tribute to this history in the upper two panels of the Heavenly Rest window. The upper left panel shows a blacksmith forging a steel shaft, representing the city's industrial might. On the upper right panel, a farmer pulls a Champion harvesting machine through the fields. Below these images is part of the final passage of the book of Matthew. Lo, I am with you always.
Thank you for joining us. If you would like to support these virtual visits, please consider becoming a member of the Westcott House today. Thanks.